Hello, everybody. My name is Karl Mulligan, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Appify Limited. As you probably know at this stage, Appify is a mobile app development, management, and servicing agency. Following on from our live session on TikTok last Thursday night, a number of questions were asked that we couldn't refer to properly in the live. And so I'm going to address some of those questions now. Particularly, this video will be related to the process of developing a mobile application. Obviously, at Appify, we develop lots and lots of applications for lots and lots of purposes. And so I suppose the process is second nature to us, but I fully appreciate that for somebody who's embarking on the journey for the first time, it can be a little bit daunting. So let me outline what the steps typically involved in developing a mobile app are. The first step is conceptualization or ideation, where a business or a brand or an entrepreneur comes up with an idea for a mobile application. And obviously some thought needs to be given as to what the application will do, how it will do it, who will do it for, what value it will add, and potentially how it might be monetized. So how it will generate a revenue for the promoter of the application, whether that is a business, a brand, or an entrepreneur. Once we have a broad idea as to what the app is going to be and what it's going to do, the next part of the process can be referred to as a number of things. It can be validation or legitimization, where we do some research to find out a number of things. Firstly, is our hypothesis correct that this application will add value? And how do we find that out? Well, if you're a business or a brand, the chances are you might engage a marketing agency or your marketing department to do some research as to what people that will potentially use the app think of the idea. If it's a thing that you're an individual entrepreneur, you're doing this for the first time, your legitimization and validation process may be as simple as speaking to other people in your business, in your line of work, related to the industry for which you're going to develop this application, talk to some potential users and outline your idea and see whether or not these people think that idea is engaging, whether it is potentially something that they would be interested in using themselves, people that they know might be interested in using for whatever reason. And once we have a reasonable idea that the idea is valid and the people will actually use the app, we can then start to put some meat in the bones in terms of planning out what it might do. And that really is the next step, and that's the planning phase. The planning phase generally starts while the legitimization process is still ongoing, and we start to put some flesh in the bones in terms of our concept. So that might mean documenting to some greater or lesser extent what the application will do. So putting down on paper what the actual process would be, the user flow would be for somebody actually engaging with the application. Other things that need to be considered at the planning stage are things like, well, how are we going to finance this application? How long will it take? What's it going to cost? How will we actually launch it? What is our commercialization plan around that? So how long will it take for us to recoup our investment? How are we going to generate the revenue to recoup our investment? And ultimately going forward, how much money might we be able to generate from this mobile application? Now, I'm speaking broadly about applications that whose value proposition is around generating revenue. Not all applications are like that, but typically speaking, there will be a business plan that is written around the application and specifically what value it will add to the existing business or to the new business that's going to be formed by the entrepreneur. Once we have the planning elements broadly done, we can start speaking to app development agencies about things that I've mentioned need to be in that planning process, like what's it going to cost? How long is it going to take? How do we get this to market? And all of those things that really start to help us think about the rubber hitting the road. What will this actually mean in the real world and what value would it add? Appify, generally speaking, offers a free service around estimation of app development projects. So as part of your planning process, if you want further information about how many hours will it take to build this, what kind of skill sets will I need to bring this app to life, how would an agency like you take this on, and what's involved in working with an agency like yours, or potentially are there freelancers that I can work with in other parts of the world? And once we start to understand more about what the process is, we can feed that information back into our plan. So at this stage, things that need to happen is there needs to be some kind of a written plan as to what the app is. What's it going to do in terms of functionality and features? How will the user use the application? What user groups will the application have? Is there an admin user requirement? Is it just simply an end user requirement? What other people will be involved in with the application on a day-to-day basis? Then what we need to do is, once we understand the overall features and functions, without wanting to get overly technical, we call those main user journeys, we call those epics, and then we start to break those down into things that we call on the development side user stories. So as a user, with this application, I can. As a user, I can. As a user, I can, and so on. And then, as I mentioned, on the admin side, there will also be user stories. So as an admin, I can. As an admin, I can. As an admin, I can. And then once we understand exactly what it is that the administrator can do with the application and the user can do with the application, we start to break that down into development tasks. So what are the individual niche elements that are going to make this application? What are the constituent elements of the application? And once we have an entire list of what those elements are, we can then start to estimate the process as to what it's going to cost, how long is it going to take, how many developers do we need, what skill sets and experience do those developers need to have, so on and so forth. We can then provide you with the information necessary to complete your business plan. And once you understand what the implications of bringing this application to life are, you can then start to do the hard work around making sure that your finances are in place, your whatever stakeholders you need within your business to bring this business to life, whether you need investment partners or you need business partners or you need people that will bring sweat equity or non-executive directors or whatever those people might be, we can start to piece those parts of the puzzle together at that point. Then you're ready to start developing the application. So this is the exciting part. Well, the exciting part from our perspective. The very, very start of that process is to start to design the application. So what it's going to look like, what are the user interfaces going to look like? And that's generally a collaborative process with the business or the brand or the entrepreneur to make sure that we're developing interfaces that are in line with what their vision of the application will be. And obviously we'll bring our expertise to that and we can advise through that process. Once we understand what the screens are going to look like, we can then start to build those screens in a sequence in which they will actually deliver the user journey that's outlined and documented in the technology plan within the business plan. So we then build the application. That process can take anything between typically 8 and 16 plus weeks. Certainly our encouragement to you would be that it shouldn't be any more than 8 to 12 weeks, because anything bigger than that generally means that we're adding features and functions to the application that haven't been fully validated. So our encouragement to you is, first and foremost, we'll focus on nothing more than building the core value stream of the application. So ultimately, the central core functionality of the application, what does that deliver to who in very, very specific terms? And then once we have that built, that can then be tested by potential lookalike end users. This process is typically called beta testing, where within a controlled group of potential lookalike users, we can start to generate some feedback as to what's good about the application, what the application could do better, what the application isn't doing that it needs to do, what the application is doing that there's really no necessity for, and so on, so that we can refine it somewhat before it goes to a broad global release. So once we get to the end of the process of developing the first phase of the application, there will be a process of testing. Now, in reality, I'm referring to that as the next part of the process. The truth is that happens all through the development process, or at least it should. It does with an agency like Appify, where as we develop technology, we're constantly testing it so that we don't end up at a point where we get to the end of the development journey, start the testing, and then possibly find that there's fundamental flaws. It's much better to find those flaws as we're developing earlier in the process so that all of those things can be put right and maximize the probability that by the time we get to the process, everything will work exactly as it should be. Then, depending on the preference of the business or the brand or the entrepreneur, we either then go to market with that by assisting you to publish it in the app stores, or you will do further validation at that point before we come to the point of release. Once we have the first version of the application launched, it's very, very important to gather as much intelligence from users as quickly as you can around the value proposition or the envisaged value proposition that the app was intended to deliver. So is it doing what it hoped we would do? Is it delivering the utility that we expected that it would deliver to the end users. What kind of limitations do end users feel the application has at this point? What is the next step on the journey? Because we need to understand that, like the vast majority of businesses, if you have a product for a market and it never changes or evolves, at some point in time it's going to die. And mobile applications are exactly the same. They have to constantly evolve and add more and more benefit to do two things. First of all, to make sure the users continue to be engaged, but secondly, to fend off our competition, to make sure that we're evolving our product to make sure that it's not easily duplicatable by somebody else. So that then creates a process, the final part of the process, which is an ongoing part of the process, and it's called reiteration. And during reiteration, what we do is we envisage the next set of value propositions for the application, and the next set, and the next set. And then we build and we test, we build and we test, we build and we test. And every time that we test, we develop more and more intelligence from our users as to what they would like to see the application do. And we constantly feed that back into the development process to make sure that your product is as good and as engaging and as valuable and as profitable as it can be. So I hope that's made some sense of what can be a long and complex journey. In reality, it need not be overly complex.